Hi, Deborah.
Hi, Mark.
So it's been 10 years since we did our last little project together. It's
Wow.
kind of cool to be doing this now, eh?
It is. It's great. Yeah.
And you had to do a lot of work, though, and so much has happened in 10 years. Isn't it amazing?
It's amazing, yeah. It's
And-
amazing.
And for this, I guess what we want to look at is what changes happened in your life way back then, and even before we met the first time. What, 2 decades ago? How long's it been since you first started seeing these changes occur?
Well, I guess it was, a couple of decades. I won't say how many. And, well, the changes that I experienced were going from one way of being in life and being interested in really doing well in the world and investing all my time in it, to spending the rest of my life, or a good part of my life, in ashrams and following spiritual enlightenment, basically.
And what prompted you to start exploring that side of life?
Well, when I was 29, I had some health issues, and I was led to kind of an enlightenment course. And I just thought, well, okay, I'm going to try this. I started to try new things. Prior to that, I was not interested in anything. I was, don't tell me I know. If it's not medical or worldly, I don't want to hear about it. But then later, when I wasn't that well, I thought, well, okay, I'll try these things. So I did this course, and in the course, I had what they call a direct experience. And when an experience is direct, it means it's something that is inside of you that nobody can take away from you. It's there forever. And the direct experience that I had was, some call it enlightenment, but I don't like that word. It's more knowing that we're not just this body, and we're not just this mind, we're something much greater, something all-pervasive, and filled with light and love, basically. In fact, we're not anything that we think we are. And after that experience, of course, life changed.
And what was it? Was there something specific that happened that made you more conscious of needing to change the way you were?
That's a good question. Needing to change. Well, it wasn't that so much. It wasn't that I felt that I needed to change. I just didn't know there was an option, really. I didn't know that there was some other reality that existed. So the changes that happened on their own. It wasn't like I was doing it, or I was making change, or it felt like this, just imagine this wave that came and just took me on this wave. And this wave took me to course after course after course, to master after master, to understand more deeply what I had experienced in that workshop. Well, I don't even want to call it a workshop. It was much more than that. It was a much bigger situation than a workshop where you're working with the psychological or this and that. It was beyond the psychological. It was beyond the mind. And that was the idea. But by going beyond the mind is where we find the truth.
And what was it in the moment, like, I guess, when you were in the doing the work to connect with that part of yourself? To the reason for the retreat was an enlightenment experience, and
that
so
was the purpose of it. Yeah.
that was the purpose of it. So, what was it that happened that made you realize that this direct experience had occurred, actually?
Well, what happened is it was one of those workshops where you have a partner and you ask your partner, tell me who you are. I mean, people have heard of this. It's not a brand new thing. And it's sort of the age-old question, who am I, was used in this particular setting. And so partners would say, tell me who you are. And then you go, well, I'm this kind of person, I'm with that. And then finally the mind gets emptied out. And for me, what happened is my partner said, tell me who you are. And I was so mad and so fed up, sitting there with people with bad breath after, hours and hours and days, having to answer this stupid question. Finally, they said, tell me who you are. And I forgot to tell you, I also had this horrible headache. It felt like this thing at the top of my head. And they said, tell me who you are. And I just screamed out of nowhere, who the hell do you think I am? Like, I was so mad that I had to deal with this. And at that moment, I heard a crack at the top of my head, an actual crack. Then the headache just completely disappeared. And then I started laughing and laughing and laughing. I couldn't stop laughing because I saw that we're not this body. We're not this thing that we think we are. We're something, we're not even here in the way we think. We're so much more than that. And that was the most powerful experience. It's seeing, I can say, oh, we saw the light, I saw the light or this or that, but it was more than seeing light. It was more than a phenomena, if you know what I mean. It was more like, tell me who you are. It's like, I am everything. I am that. I am me. I am everything. So I'm everything, but the ego part, is nothing at the same time. So it was not something you could comprehend with your mind. So it was a bit tricky. It was a bit tricky to a person that started out on this particular tact and I was totally skeptical of everything before that. I was totally not interested, but I thought I would try it. And incidentally, after that experience, I had a miraculous healing. And I talk about that in my first book, so it's just a longer story, but it's, it was pretty amazing.
Amazing enough to take you down a whole different path in your life.
Totally, yeah. And it wasn't like I decided, okay, now I'm going to do this and go in that direction, because I thought I'd just go home and do my usual things and see my friends and go to work. But when I went to work on that Monday, I would look at I was teaching aerobics, and I was, right in there with all of that time period, and some dance, and I was modeling, and that was my life at the time. But that Monday after that, or I think it was maybe Tuesday, but it was in that range, Monday, Tuesday, beginning of the week, when I saw the people that I was working with, the people that came for my class or came to the club that I worked in, all I could see is light in their eyes. I'd look and I wouldn't even see a person over there. I see nothing but love. And I couldn't stop staring at them. I would just keep looking in their eyes, and I would see love. And my heart would just be like expanded beyond the beyond. And I couldn't say anything because I knew that I would look weird. I couldn't say, I love you, I love you. I just had to be myself, looking at them and just seeing something's happened. Because I just, because of the nature of my personality, I was just ready to go, okay, that was a good experience, now let's... But I couldn't move on in the same way anymore. It was like living in a different frequency.
So once you've had an experience like that, any individual, once they've had an experience like that, there's no going back.
No, people, we try to go back because we still have to, pay the rent and make our life work kind of thing. But But life knows, or spirit knows, whatever you want to call it, where you're supposed to go after that. And for me, what happened is people started coming to me for courses out of nowhere. And the strange thing is that I would sit down with a group of people, and I would know whatever could answer whatever they asked me. I didn't have a specific training in that mental way. It was like I was a voice. It wasn't like my voice either. It was the voice that came.
So previous to that, that voice wasn't as noticeable to you then? After that experience, you started hearing these things more?
Yeah, well, it took a little while after the experience before this happened. Because I was still reeling over, having this miraculous healing, and I left my husband, which, it was nothing wrong with the husband. It was just simply I had this thing move me along. And so that was a lot. But once I got sort of settled into my new life, then I noticed people coming to me and asking for help. And I thought, well, what do I know? But when I would put a group together, it would work. And things would come through, and healings would happen, and I just did it. I didn't do it, but I was there, or I think something was there.
So you were changing, and you already mentioned your husband, which is an interesting, you had to sever certain ties with relationships and other friends. Mm-hmm. What was it like for you to do that with friends and family?
Well, it was very tumultuous, the time that I went through, because it was difficult because, a part of me looks back and goes, I didn't really have to change anything. I really didn't have to. I could have left it. But it wasn't me deciding it. It just had its own course. And it was painful in some ways, because the part of me that was still in that old life kind of wanted to be in that old life. But things were changing. My body, my physical body was changing. I would be sitting on a chair levitating, without wanting to. It wasn't like it was all so much fun that way. So I looked for masters that were trained in that kind of thing. When people had massive awakenings, they could help, bring it down a few octaves.
And how did that work for you? What did you have to go through in order to start containing this energy that you'd brought into your life?
Well, I found it difficult because it was a very intense energy that was, running through me at the time. And it was just certain practices that I ended up doing that helped a bit. I didn't go out a lot. I had to, that's when my life was changing, because I was becoming more inner than more outer, because I was very outer. I wanted to be doing all kinds of outer things, and that became more difficult, and I couldn't do them in the same way. But I started teaching more, so it channeled in different ways.
And you said that as you started teaching, students were being attracted to what you could do for them as well. Yeah. So that's really how it ultimately became. It sort of found its place, if you know what I mean. Whatever that was rolling through, and some call it kundalini, whatever. But I don't like to label any of that in that way. I just see it as, okay, something moving through, and when it's time, it'll do what it's going to do. So all of those experiences that you had early on, how have you managed, how have you brought all those different bits and pieces together into the writing, into the story that you're involved in now, as far as helping other people as a spiritual mentor and and with your own evolution.
Well, writing books was a big part of it. And the books were, interestingly enough, I had no intent. Like, I fought all the way through this whole process in a way, because I would get a inner command, and one of the commands was, you must write this book. And I thought, well, I don't write. I'm not a writer. And first of all, and secondly, I'm not willing to sit there for hours writing something. So I got the inspiration for it in one of the islands out here, and it was like this light was on the road, this huge light, and I felt like I was being lifted up. And then I was shown this book, and the book ended up being called The Magic Doorway into the Divine. And in the book there was poetry, and there was something very creative and loving and beautiful about it. And so I saw that, and I thought, oh, it's okay, that's pretty good. So I scratched away for a little bit, and then I dropped it. I thought, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that, it's too much work. Anyways, it turned out the groups that I had at the time were asking me to write something, so they'd have it to work with. So I ended up scratching away, and it took me 12 years to write it. And part of why it took 12 years is because I had to live through and integrate all that I had written in it. So that made it, it was a lot. It took a lot of my physical energy. It took a lot to do. But it was a work of love. And again, it was one of those things where I would be writing and the whole room would fill with light. And it became a bestseller on Amazon, and it's used for courses in mysticism, and it's seen as a roadmap of the spiritual journey. Because I wrote about the different stages of this, because I'd gone through these stages. There was the stage of awakening, and then the stage of the door openers, and then the things that close the door, which is the ego, all of those things that keep us from knowing our true self. And then there was the dark night of the soul, which I did not want to write. I'm like, no, I want a nice light book, don't make me write this dark night of the soul. Anyway, it was one of those strong commands, so I did. And interestingly enough, 3 people didn't suicide because they read the dark night of the soul. So that was kind of cool. They didn't suicide because they saw that they weren't alone. They saw there was something so much greater than, it makes me cry actually when I think of this. But I was very happy that it had some benefit to people. And then the final part of the book, it was Return to the Garden. The garden is we've never left the garden. We've always been there. It's like that. We're not human beings striving for a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings already. And we just don't know that because no one's told us. It's that simple. No one's told us.
I think it's still recording. I don't know when that card will be filled up, so
Okay.
we'll just
Yeah.
change cards at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one told us exactly. So
Uh-huh.
we start our lives in this from this place of conditioning that builds layers and layers on
Yeah.
everything that we do to a point that we don't even know. Like you said at
Yeah.
the start, we don't even know what
don't
we
even
are
know
anymore.
what we are. And we're not guided in that direction at all. No one guides us. I mean, sure, you can do this and that, and do some yoga or, whatever, but it's so much more than that to shed that idea of who you are.
Well, and it's like the status quo doesn't want that to be an empowering part of our lives.
No,
So
no.
that's what makes it even critically
Yeah.
important for
Yeah.
books like yours, from like Magic
Uh-huh.
Doorway to the Divine
Right.
and Leap to Freedom.
Uh-huh.
These books are what we need now to
Right.
start, and your online course, to start teaching people how
Yeah.
to wake up.
Exactly. Well, uh, interestingly enough, I got another command to write the second book that I wrote, called Leap to Freedom, Healing Quantum Guilt. So I made up this name called Quantum Guilt. And people say, oh, you can't use that name. I go, sure you can. You can do anything. But then I made sure it fit, you know, because quantum is the most infinitesimally small thing in the world. So from that place we all came, and along with it came guilt. And it's also a larger guilt, a guilt that nobody even knows about. It's a mystery. It's something, it's not your psychological guilt that you did something wrong or you didn't do it. It's more that guilt that is underneath the surface all the time, that makes you feel uncomfortable, and you don't know why. You feel kind of weird, you know, you're not quite in your right place. And why you're not in your right place, because you don't know who you are. You don't know that we're one. We don't know. Again, no one's taught us. We think we're two. So there's another country over there that's doing bad things, and there's a person's got the wrong color, or somebody's culture is totally wrong and bad, or this group's taking over the town, or, you know, we've got all this separation going, divorces, relationships. People don't think of the whole when they tear down a building. They don't think of the whole. They think of the money, you know. So this kind of separation is what we're always dealing with, and this is the quantum guilt, you know, the deep guilt that we suffer from because we believe we're two. So when we believe we're two, we look over there and we see, you know, well, I don't like that person's clothes, or I don't like their hair, I don't like... But if we know that we're one, you don't even see that. You just see their divinity. And that's why I wrote, well, no, that's not why I wrote the book, actually. It is eventually why I wrote the book, but it was another one of those commands. I was sitting on this floor, in fact, and I had this command. This was after the other book was done, and I'm like, okay, that's it, no more books. I'm done. And I got another command that said, you must write about guilt. And I thought, guilt? You know, well, because I'm thinking, oh yeah, because I was brought up Catholic. And so when you're brought up Catholic, you know, you got all this guilt and everything. So I didn't want to do it again. Like I'm like that. And finally, you know, I started looking into guilt, and that's when I realized and discovered that guilt is not what we think it is. It's something far greater, and something that affects our whole world, our whole life. And so as I worked on that book and went into that book, it was amazing. And I brought in science and spirituality because the two come together. The great masters say the same things as the scientists are saying now. And that ties into this separation as well.
It's a magical time to be alive right now, seeing those things come together that way.
Yeah, it is magical. It is magical, and it was thrilling for me to write that book at times. I loved it. And another thing that happened with it is a lot of people that read it, some parts people didn't quite get. They couldn't quite, but something happened in their life, and they'd phone me or they'd see me at a talk and they'd say, I don't know what happened, but I was changed. Something in me just completely lightened up. And it was just from reading your book. It changed something deep inside of them. And I don't know, I mean, I didn't do it. I didn't even want to write the book. But the voice, or that which uses us, had me write it, and the right people not the right people, it's a wrong word, but the people that were supposed to read it came and benefited. So that to me was really, really exciting too.
Well, it really speaks to changing the world from the inside out too,
Oh,
instead of that whole
yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
convince politicians and CEOs to behave
you'll never
differently.
Get anywhere.
We
You'll never
won't.
get anywhere.
No.
You know, because if we could do this. We could actually do this if we could see the innocence in everything that exists. In other words, if we could see everything is just the way it is and bring love to it, see the innocence in it, we could start to change the world. But as it is, all we have is judgment. And every time we judge something, we're putting a curse on somebody or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I really feel that war, everything else, any kind of violent thing, it all comes from that quantum guilt. And that's, the more separated you feel, the more violent. It's not like sins are first. It's guilt that's first. The unconscious guilt, the guilt that believes you're separate from that person, so sure, you could hurt them because you're separate. But if you know you're not separate, you're not going to be so, quick to harm another.
How could you?
How
You
could
would be harming yourself.
Yeah, and that's the reason I wrote that book, for my own soul part. And then I wanted people to understand it more clearly, so I made up a course. And in the course I call it Leap to Freedom, Crack the Illusion of Separation and Heal Quantum Guilt. So we find out why we're not guilty, what the scientists say about it, what the masters say about it. And then we discover that to the place where we begin to crack that illusion of separation, where we start to see in our life oneness and love. So that's the goal of the course. I give people homework, and I also have a deck of cards that I made up, and we play with those as well. So, and I'm giving away also a free ebook for the course, anyone that signs up for the course, as well as these cards in an electronic form.
And what do you think the people will find for themselves in your course? What will they get out of it?
Well, I can't say, really, because everyone gets what they need. Everyone's different, everyone gets what they need. Some person might, when I give a group or something, one person may get something I would never have thought anyone needed. So you can't know. We can't always know it. I don't think we know anything, really.
Are people that take the course able to follow up with spiritual mentoring with you then?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We do that as well. And there's any questions, we deal with that. And we'll be dealing with the questions in a format that other people can hear them as well. The answers, yeah. Or whatever. I don't like to call them answers, but
the discussion.
The discussion.
Right. And so will there be more, is there a follow-up to this then? Like when you created this first course, which you've done now, how do you see that evolving?
Well, I don't know quite yet, because this is the first online course I've done. And I never thought I would, again, like the books. I thought, no way, I'm not getting on that internet. I'm not doing some silly course on the internet. And here I am. I did it. I put it together. I don't know how great it is or whatever. I may not fit the whole way it's done these days, but at least I'm saying what I want to say. And that's kind of what that's about for me. And, as far as other courses, yeah, if this one seems to move and people are benefiting, I'd love to do other courses. Because it's love that makes you do things, It's like, it's love. Like I would have never thought years ago that I'd be doing this kind of thing. Never.
So there is no real choice involved in this at this point. It's your mission almost in life is creating this connectedness between people, or expanding that connectedness.
Well, in a sense, that's true. But the thing that I find and I found that when I first came out of that course where I had the big experience years and years ago, and even now, is that everyone you look at is you. That's the big connectiveness, is knowing that there's nobody out there. There's only one. And so that in itself is, well, that's basically what Leap to Freedom's about, is to know that why they're innocent, well, they're you. Every person that comes into your life is you. Everything that happens is you.